Welcome to the Lit Mom Podcast, your go-to source for bite-sized literacy tips and tricks. Join me as we explore evidence-based strategies, techniques, and resources that promote strong reading and writing skill development. Get ready to empower your family with the knowledge and tools to navigate the world of structured literacy and unlock limitless potential. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 4 of the Lit Mom Podcast, the podcast where I share different tips and strategies that are connected to research based on the science of reading for how you can support your child in developing their foundational literacy skills at home. As always, I'm your host, Deb, and in today's episode, we are going to talk about morphology and morphemes. These might sound complex, but in this episode, I will break them down so that they're simple and easy concepts for you to understand and be supporting your child with at home. Plus, I'll share some easy activities, I'll share a read aloud and a website that you might want to check out at the end of this episode. As always, I would first like to start by acknowledging the land in which I am recording this podcast on. I am recording this podcast on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, which includes the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. So first things first, what is morphology? We're going to start with the basics. And so morphology is considered the study of the structure of words. Think of it as the way that words are built and how they change. So just like how Lego blocks can be snapped together to make different structures, words are made up of smaller units called morphemes. Some morphemes can stand alone as words, while other morphemes need to be attached to another morpheme or other morphemes to make sense in a word. In terms of other definitions that are helpful to know, a prefix is going to be a morpheme that comes at the beginning of the word before the base word, and then a suffix is going to come at the end of the word, and it can change the meaning of the base word, but it's going to be at the end. For example, if we take the word unhappiness, there are 3 morphemes that create this one word. If we break that down further based on the smallest morphemes or units of meaning within the word, un is going to be the prefix. It comes before the base word and it means not. Next, we have happy, and happy is going to be that base word. It comes from the root word meaning feeling joy. And the last piece is ness, which is the suffix. The suffix comes after a root or a base word, and it is going to change an adjective into a noun in this case, where it is going to be a state of. When we pull all of those 3 morphemes back together to create the word unhappiness, it actually means the state of not feeling joy. So now that I have covered really quickly that morphology is the study of meaningful units within a language and how we can combine those morphemes, those smallest units of meaning to create words, we want to talk about why is it even important for us to be talking about morphology in the first place. Understanding morphology is crucial for several reasons. I would like to point out that it is also part of the new language curriculum for grades 1 to 8. There is an appendix that shows it is beneficial to start teaching some of the morphemes in kindergarten, such as plural endings, ing, past tense using ed. These are things that we want for students to understand early on, because as they start to read text, they are going to come up as they are frequently used. So it is a part of our curriculum. We are expected to teach these things in the classroom, and it is backed by research for being an important and crucial skill for students to understand and develop. So the first reason is that it helps children decode words that they come across that are new or unfamiliar, because they have an understanding of the morphemes based on the explicit instruction that they have received. So if they have a meaning of common prefixes and suffixes, they're then also able to understand and pull together what the meaning of an unfamiliar word can be. Second, it improves their spelling and writing skills. By having an understanding of how words are formed, they are more likely to be able to spell accurately. And finally, a strong grasp on morphology and morphemes is going to benefit children in their development of their vocabulary skills. So ultimately, having a strong understanding of morphology and morphemes is going to benefit our children in those foundational skills of decoding, writing and spelling, vocabulary development, comprehension. So it plays a role in many aspects of a student's journey to becoming successful in reading and writing. While it is important to acknowledge that we want to ensure that we are explicitly teaching morphemes to our children and it is being taught in the classroom, we want to make sure that we are engaging in fun activities that allow for them to practice reading and writing different morphemes as they learn them. A little aside, if you are using UFly and you are an educator or you do tutoring or you're a teacher parent at home that uses UFly, it does incorporate and include morphemes within the scope and sequence, and it aligns really nicely with the grade 1 to 8 curriculum that is now out. So it is really going to cover phonics patterns and morphemes all in one program, which is really beneficial when we think about it being one key piece of your day. And so if educators are using it in the classroom, it's always helpful for parents to know what is being covered so that they can support at home and also have that information. One activity that you can do at home to support your child in developing their morphological awareness is by playing word detective. So if you are reading a book or they come home with a decodable passage, you might challenge them to look through the book and find specific morphemes. And you might give them a word from the book and have them then write it out. And you can have them quickly break down what the morphemes might be in the word. Again, knowing that in kindergarten, this might be as simple as looking at plural words. And so how on their own, if the word was cat, then I'm going to add an S on the end and it becomes cats, which means there are multiple cats instead of just one. And so you might have them write down the word cat and talk about that means we only have one cat. And then you say, if we add an S to the end, that means there's going to be multiple or many. And so have them write that out and show the two that they are using. Another game that I think we can all admit students love to play and children love to play is bingo. So you can always print out a blank bingo card. If you know that they have covered a couple prefixes or suffixes in class, you can make a bingo card that has those morphemes on it. When you call them out, challenge them to give you a word that uses the prefix or uses the suffixes. In our curriculum, we start to talk about the ending pieces first, the suffixes. So usually it's going to be plurals like S and ES, again, using past tense like ED, or if we're talking about doing something in action, it's ING at the end. So those are really common ones that you could put onto a bingo card and have them come up with words that they might use with it, challenge them to spell some words, use the words in the sentence. But again, bingo makes it a fun game that they can play to engage in that practice opportunity with you. Another option, if you have Legos at home, especially if you have those bigger ones, you could always use tape and write different prefixes, bases, and suffixes on them, and then have your child build words and talk about, is it a real word? Is it not a real word? Sometimes they like to just make up funny words using different morphemes, and you can just talk about, do they understand what the meaning is behind the individual morphemes when they're making up these words, and talk about why it might not make sense. I'm going to add a list of prefixes and suffixes and different morphemes to the podcast show notes. So it'll help explain different ones that you can maybe talk about at home, the meaning behind them, because again, it's really important that when we are explicitly having these conversations, we're not just pointing out that it's a morpheme and then moving on. We want to give them the meaning of the word. We want to make sure that they have an understanding of all of those components so that they're going to actually use it effectively. So it's going to take a little bit of teaching and conversations, but make sure that if you're going to point them out or talk about the morphemes, that you spend some time exploring what they're going to mean so you can have those conversations. According to a study that was done by Bowers, Kirby, and Deacon in 2010, outlines that teaching student morphemes helps them to have a better understanding of the structures of words, which enhance their ability to read and write. And another study found that students that received that explicit instruction in morphology and developing their morphological awareness excelled at skills linked to their vocabulary and reading comprehension. So morphology is a really great piece that I think we are starting to learn more about and focus more on based on the research, the fact that it's actually in our curriculum. So if there's opportunities for families at home to support with the development of this understanding, then I think it is going to be really beneficial. We don't want for morphology to seem like it's a chore. You might actually be surprised to know that children are really curious about understanding and learning different morphemes and having these connections connections to the meaning behind smaller components of words. It helps them with their reading and writing, which helps to build their confidence and motivation to do these skills, but they're actually really curious and they enjoy learning about it. So it's something that you can do at home where you're engaging in the learning with them, because I have to admit that I didn't learn morphology outside of, you might learn ing, ed, or you just had to know it, right? The classic, you need to know it because that's the way it is. Students actually really enjoy learning the why behind these components and getting that information. And it's going to boost so many components of their literacy skills to help them become successful readers and writers. Make it fun, make it engaging when you're reading together. If you're playing games, when you're out, just comment on some of the morphemes that maybe you are recognizing, that you know, especially if we're talking about those prefix. We can do we can talk about re, which is going to be to do again, in and im at the beginning of words. All of these things, these little conversations that you're having, are going to allow for your child to expand their knowledge base and have opportunities to have practice and engage in conversations with you for feedback. Right now, knowing that it is getting to be summer, maybe you take out some chalk and you give them a word and they have to box or put a rectangle around the base of the word, and then they can add in an underline or circle the prefix or suffix if you add them in, or just give them a base and challenge them to add prefixes that make sense or suffixes that make sense. But you can do this with chalk outside. You can just have those conversations. If you're reading a book, challenge them to point out some of those morphemes. Again, check in to make sure they understand what they actually mean, but make it so that it's just those short intentional moments where you're tying in these key components of literacy in day-to-day experiences. That's it for today's episode of the Lit Mom podcast. I didn't want to throw too much information out in this podcast episode. I think it's important sometimes to keep it short and sweet. So that is going to be all of the information I want to share today on morphology. I hope that you found this episode to be valuable with the tips and tricks, a few different game options that you can play that are different from some of the other games that may have been recommended in previous episodes, and that you have some tools in your toolbox to help teach your child or support your child with their learning and understanding of morphology and morphemes. The website that I am recommending for this episode is Can Do Kids Academy. This website has a variety of free literacy resources that you can download and use. They're often going to be tied to different read alouds, which I think is great. Again, if you have the book at home or you take it out from the library, you can use the book and then have that extension of a very intentional activity or lesson. They do use what is called a word matrix. And so really quickly, a word matrix is going to outline the base of the word, the meaning of that base word, and then give different options for prefixes that can be used with it, as well as suffixes. So you can challenge your child to make as many different words as they can from that word matrix. And we call those word sums. So this is just another activity that you can check out to have that additional piece. If you're looking for your child to have an extension when talking about morphology and developing their morphological awareness, Can Do Kids Academy is a great option. And again, it has many free resources that you can download and use. The book that I am choosing today is called Don't Trust Cats: Life Lessons by Chip the Dog. And so this just showed up on my doorstep as I was starting to do the podcast. So I wanted to make sure that I got it out of the box to show it to you. But Dev Petty and Mike Bolt are going to be the author and illustrator that Emerson really enjoys. And so we've got this one in the mail for him to check out and read. But I think it's a great one when I think about students that are looking at plural form of words. For example, cats. If I have just one, it's cat. If I have multiple, it's cats. There are words such as bees, ones. So you could always have that conversation just from using a book, again, of pointing out, when do you notice that we're using the plural form of a word? What does that tell you about the word? How does it change the meaning from when the base is on its own? But again, just a fun little humorous book that you might enjoy checking out with your child or children. In episode 5 of season 2 of the Lit Mom podcast, I'm going to spend some time talking about the summer slide and some different activities you can be doing at home to help try and maintain the skills that your child has already developed and become proficient in this year at school, so that when they go into the new grade and they get back into the swing of things after summer, they're ready to keep going and they haven't lost any of that learning, or if they've lost some of it, it's not as significant of an impact as it can be. So we're going to talk about the summer slide and what you can do at home to keep literacy living in your day-to-day activities. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Lit Mom podcast. I always appreciate feedback from the Lit team, which includes you as a listener. I want to know what has gone well, what you have enjoyed, what you're still wondering about, so that I can always be purposeful and responsive in the podcast episodes that I am putting out. I know that it has been a greater length of time in between the podcasts, so thank you for your patience. I am trying to maintain that balance of work and life and sharing all of these tips and tricks with everyone. So I appreciate that you keep coming back when the episodes do get posted. As always, please keep sharing the podcast episodes. Go back and listen to some of the other ones if you haven't had the opportunity to do so, and spread the word that this is out there so that we can support one another and developing those reading and writing skills for our kiddos. With that, I'm your host, Dev. This is the Lit Mom podcast, where we bring literacy tips and tricks straight to your headphones. Until next time, keep learning, keep reading, keep growing.